Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast. Today with us is Ari Meisel. He's founder at Let's Doing, has been running that since the past 13 years. He's a self-described overwhelmologist, which is amazing. Started his career in emergency as an emergency medical technician, educated at the Wharton School in entrepreneurship psychology. This is going to be a fun one, guys. This one is presented to you by podfire.com. If you want to start or scale or monetize your podcast, you can go to podfire.com. Ari, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thank you very much for having me. So I guess my main work, what I do most of the time, is as a coach, I'm a business coach focused on productivity and systems and processes and automation. I've been doing that for about 14 years now, and I've worked with founders, CEOs, COOs of all different kinds of companies, different sizes, different industries. And the methodology is called the replaceable founder. So I help them become more replaceable. And on the side of that, I am a volunteer EMT. I'm the vice president of our local rescue squad here. And I'm also a father of five. I have 5 young children, 12 and under. And right now I'm running for school board in our town. So busy.
What's a school board?
It's the body of people, the elected body that oversees the whole school district and how things are done.
Why is this important for you?
Well, since I have 5 kids who are all, well, one of them is 17 months, but all the others are in school, it's a really big part of our lives. And there's some really good things about the school district we're in, and then some things that could definitely use some improvement. And I'd like to bring my productivity, efficiency mind to some of the things that are done here. It's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, it's you're into many things, but it all started with your own struggle with chronic illness. So tell us about that personal part of your story and how did that shape you as a coach?
Yeah. So when I was 23 years old, I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is a chronic inflammatory condition that affects the digestive tract. It's considered to be incurable by the medical profession. And after 2 years of getting really sick, I started on the path of biohacking and was able to overcome the illness after several months. And now 18 years later, I'm I'm cured as far as I haven't had any pain, no medicine, and I've also replicated my results in hundreds of other people with Crohn's. But a big part of that process was recognizing that stress was a really big part of what was affecting me and my body. And my response to that basically was to create a new system of productivity to deal with that stress, which is where Less Doing was born from. So the sort of genesis for how that came about was I was working 18 hours a day, got really sick, couldn't do that anymore. I was basically being able to work 1 hour a day at most. And that question of, what would you do if you could only work an hour a day is really what has driven all of the books and the speaking and the coaching and everything that's come since then.
Tell me about the biohacks you used to hack your gut because, I feel I don't have autoimmune disease, but I guess I'm not conscious of all the stress I put on myself, but my gut is. So how did you hack yours? There's a bunch of startups such as Biome that are tests. There's a bunch of diets, listening to your own body. But what were your own biohacks to get that under control?
Yeah, so there is a lot out there, and the microbiome stuff is really interesting. And Viome, I've done the Viome test. It's very interesting information. Some of that actually, depending on what your situation is, I think some of that can be actionable. Some more than others. Finding out what those sort of triggers are, what are the things that you're sensitive to, that's really helpful, obviously, because a big thing especially with Crohn's disease, is you're creating scar tissue all the time, and that's almost impossible basically to get rid of. So the idea of sort of being anti-inflammatory is a really key one. So that's the biggest one for me, is that I was never gluten-free. I was vegan for like a month. I ended up being, I guess, pescatarian for quite a while, but now I can eat anything I want, whenever I want, because I've healed. And the particularly, I'm assuming, are you French or are you Belgian?
Yeah, French,
Okay.
Montreal, Canada.
I much
Yes.
okay. So at least in the United States, well, yeah, in the United States, I think a lot of people don't necessarily get enough fats, good fats in their diets. Things like olive
Mm,
oil or really high quality butters, eggs, things like that. And so high fat for me, high good fats was a really key one, and then sort of low sugar was another one as much as possible. And then
interesting.
there were some supplements too that were really crucial. I was definitely vitamin D deficient. I was not taking probiotics originally. I've played around with a bunch of those, but then there were some weird ones. Like there's a supplement called Amazonian cat. Well, sorry, it's called Cat's Claw, which is an
Yeah,
Amazonian tree bark, and that was very, very like unknown at the time when I was doing this. But that's a smooth muscle relaxer, which is what the small intestines are, and an anti-inflammatory. And so like there were things like that were really helpful. But now I'm really, I don't take anything pretty much. I just eat better and I manage my stress really well. But I had to get to a place of healing to be able to do that.
and what does your day to day look like nowadays? At what time do you get up? What do you do in your day? Please describe it.
Sure. So we have a 17-month-old right now. So typically up with her first thing in the morning, anywhere between 5 and 6. So I get up with her, and then she usually goes back to sleep fairly quickly, and then getting everybody else up in my house to get ready for school. My wife getting up and doing that as well, and then uh, mornings for me most of the time right now are pretty much spent with the baby, with my daughter Isabel, and I let my wife get some stuff done. We don't have a nanny that works with us, so I'm with her mostly in the morning. Then she takes a nap. A lot of times I will take her to a meeting or two while she's taking a nap. People have gotten used to that around me. And then I get some work done in the afternoon, which is most of the work that I do is all asynchronous Voxer communication with clients. All of my coaching is done asynchronously. So it's very rare that I would have a synchronous meeting. So I'll deal with some of that stuff. I'll deal with some of the things having to do with my position at the rescue squad. I'm also on a town board. I'm on the board of our local Jewish center, and I'm also I work with the school right now with the middle school. So there's always little things to do. So I'm going through my checklist of things I need to do. But typically, that work is like an hour a day, maybe, if that. Then I'm picking the kids up from school. Or actually, at this point, it's just my daughter. The others walk home from school. And then there's after school stuff in various forms. There's all of my kids play soccer, and we have games, we have practices, and typically, and then I'll usually have like a call or a Zoom call or something that has to do with one of the organization I'm involved in. And then I'm usually asleep around 11. So if I'm working on the ambulance, which I do once a week right now, then I go in at 11 p.m. and I work until 7 in the morning on the overnight shift on the ambulance, which is really fun.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. The async stuff, tell me a bit more about it. Like as a coach, I believe in the power of live, like even going live in my content so people can see I'm real and not some kind of AI, right? And
Mhm.
it's in the moment as well. I also film these calls for content and for insights. The AIs provide insights out of that. So I'm still bullish on synced events. Tell me about the async part of it.
So asynchronous is not an option for, synchronous is not really an option for me in most cases, right? So like this call that we're having right now is basically the only synchronous meeting like this that I have the whole week, right? Other than like work related stuff. And uh, just with the way that my life is and the schedule that I keep, if I wanted to get anything done, synchronous is usually not just going to be an option. So given that, that's when I originally, years ago now, it's like 3 or 4 years, is when I started doing coaching over Voxer. And I totally hear what you're saying about like the AI and the bots up, but with Voxer, for me, it's all voice communication. So they know it's me, even though we can obviously we can clone voices now, but I'm not doing that in real time. So there are a lot of times where someone will ask me a question and I'll get back to them almost immediately. So it can feel synchronous at times. But what I found, I tried to do it initially as a way of being more convenient and productive for myself, but I've actually found it for me and the coaching that I do to be a more effective form of coaching, because ultimately what happens is, instead of somebody having to wait till next Wednesday for the 12 o'clock session they have with me, they can have something happens on a Thursday, they get in a fight with their co-founder or they fire somebody or whatever, and they just need to let it out, and they can immediately unload that into Voxer. And then I can listen to it, 2 hours later, 3 hours later, digest it, and come back to them with like the silver bullet answer that they need. So it's been fascinating. Now, and I do my sales that way too. So if people want to work with me, they have to get on Voxer and start a conversation. And so what used to be a 45-minute, sales call is now 7 minutes of exchanged audio over the course of 12 hours with the same result.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see how that could be a blocker for some just to download the app, but I can also see the value, especially on your side using voice. Me, I always tell people to not send me voice messages other than if it's on iMessage, because there's a text feature, right? There's a voice to text I can see. But yeah, I don't have time to listen to messages, that's for sure. Anyway, this is super interesting, like how you built your business, how you're serving your clients. Is there value in solving urgencies in the moment, or do you prefer waiting? Like your clients, if they have an urgency, is there value for you to immediately intervene, or is your process like chill, take a breath, and we'll talk about it in like 2 to 3 hours?
That's an excellent question. So one of the things I actually take people through in my replaceable founder program is identifying what constitutes an urgency or an emergency for them. And by the way, there's a difference between an emergency and an urgent, right? So an emergency is like, hackers have stolen all of our money. Like that's an emergency. Urgent for a lot of people is really dependent on the perspective, right? Because for somebody, it's like, oh my God, this huge client is upset. That seems urgent. And for the boss or something, it's be like, he does that every 2 weeks. He gets upset about something. It's not a big deal. So to me, urgent is something that I want to be interrupted for. And in my life right now, there is nothing business related that would meet that criteria. The only thing that meets that criteria is something that has happened regarding my children. So if the school nurse calls me because one of my kids is sick and needs to come home, that's something I want to be interrupted for. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. But that nothing else sort of reaches that level. So when I take clients through that exercise, what they almost inevitably end up finding is that there's maybe one or two, or oftentimes nothing, that makes that list of truly urgent. And it's something they can take, there can be a process in place, or it just can, it can wait an hour, it can wait a half an hour. And not even so much like I'm busy, I need an hour. It's more just like the mindset that people are often in when they're in the moment is not the mindset that they ultimately want to be using to make an effective decision. And there's a big difference between reacting and responding.
Interesting. So, okay, someone has a real life emergency, right? Let's say that hackers have hit them up. Should they call themselves in some shape and form? Should they interact with an AI like I do to brainstorm and see if they're making a good decision? What is usually the process to make a good decision and solve the emergency as quick as possible?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I do that quite a bit actually with ChatGPT, for example, where I'll sort of brainstorm and go back and forth on things about different ideas before I talk to another human about it at this point.
Yeah.
Just especially as entrepreneurs, and this, right? Like it's very easy to sort of get in your own head and oftentimes think something is like the most amazing idea ever, but then it turns out it's not, because you're like, it's like a sounding board. So yeah, there is definitely value in that, because otherwise, unfortunately, especially for entrepreneurs, it's really easy to sort of like lose control and sort of run away with something, and go on a path that you didn't really necessarily need to go on, because we'll fill that void. So yeah, I think there's huge value on that. That's sort of like phone a friend emergency situation, the bat phone.
Right. Then I want to talk about your productivity system. Working 1 hour a day is quite interesting. Like, are you still like afloat financially? Like, just working 1 hour a day, are you reaching all your financial goals with that? Like, what's your philosophy? And then, yeah, how do you actually maximize productivity? I feel there's a lot of gamification there.
So it's productivity is producing more, right? And efficiency is producing more with less, but being effective is producing the right thing. And so for me, it's a constant thing about I want to be doing the right things. What's going to have the biggest impact and move the needle the most for me, right? So that's not necessarily that's not necessarily being the most productive. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm having the most clients possible or the most client calls possible. Having said that, I with my asynchronous Voxer coaching, I still charge the same amount that I was charging when I was doing one-on-one in-person stuff. It's still one-on-one, and it's unlimited. So I have clients who I speak to every single day, but it's for a couple minutes. And then I have other clients that I hear from once a month, and I have a couple that I hear from once every like 2 or 3 months. But I also do a group broadcast for all of my clients. It's like a private podcast essentially once a week that sort of gives them things to think about or work on and keeps that engagement there. So in that an hour a day, I'm probably talking to clients about 20 minutes, like, which I know sounds crazy, but I think right now I have like 26 clients in over 10 time zones. But if one of them sends me a 5-minute message and I listen to it at 3 times speed, and then I get back to them with a 2-minute answer, like that, that's how it works out. So it's I've kind of figured out a way of bending time in that way. So yes, financial goals have definitely been met that way. I also have courses that I sell. I still have my books, and yeah, it works. And to that end, I know I could grow the business more if I wanted to, but I really don't need to or want to per se. It's I like getting to work with people that I find interesting and have interesting problems, and get the fulfillment that I need.
Yeah, and I feel you created a full funnel around yourself. I mean, you've interviewed and been interviewed by a bunch of cool folks like Jordan Harbinger that I had on my podcast, or Harbinger, James Clear, David Allen that I also interviewed. There's Tim Ferriss, Dan Sullivan, which is incredible. Um, like, how are you as a person? Are you like this OCD type, and you succeeded into calming yourself? Because you look like a very high performer that went through some stuff and then had to pivot and sort of reinvent your minds. Like, how were you as a person when you were younger?
Well, so I started my first company when I was 12. And then my second one when I was 16, and my third one when I was 17. So I had 3 operating companies before I graduated high school. So I guess that could make me a high performer. I was not very interested in school, and I've always tried to like push to do more and different things. So I've always been very entrepreneurial. I've always been the type that like sort of sees a problem as only like a temporary hurdle in many ways. And I think I really have always sort of thrived on that problem solving sort of idea. Uh, it I was not particularly popular when I was a kid. I'll tell you that. I was always more interested in working on my company stuff than sort of making friends, and I think that came out in different ways. But most entrepreneurs, I feel like, are working out their own psychological issues on their companies anyway, so it fits the bill.
Right. And do you feel you have all your shit together nowadays? Like, how are your stress levels now that you're managing all of these things? Are you always implementing your old systems, or are there bumps in the road here and there?
There's always going to be bumps in the road, right? I mean, otherwise you're not doing something right, I think, because if we're not making ourselves uncomfortable, right, then it's very hard to grow. So no, I think I've got a very, very dialed in system. I'm able to say yes to a lot of things that I want to do, which is really nice, which is why I'm involved in like 5 town boards and running for this political office and all that kind of stuff, because I am able to do that. I'm able to make the time and manage it and do the things I want to do. It doesn't mean I don't get stressed. It happens. There's things that happen with the kids. But the other thing is, keep in mind as well, I have this sort of unfair advantage, I think, where I've been an EMT for 14 years and I've seen, horrific stuff I mean, people have died in front of me. People have died like literally in my hands, multiple times. And so like, it gives you a lot of perspective, I think, on like sort of day-to-day issues that might come up, which is helpful.
Yeah, high stress tolerance, I would guess. So tell me about these stories. It looks like a very fulfilling job to be an EMT, but yeah, it might be very stressful as well if you don't have the ways to deal with that. A lot of EMTs have depression. Some of them kill themselves, doctors as well. So tell us about how did you got in the profession first, some stories, some insights that you have got, and yeah, the problem of depression, suicide, and all of that in EMTs and doctors.
So, well, I mean, I have worked as an EMT, but for the most part, as an EMT, I've been a volunteer. I just want to make that, clarify that it's the same skill set. It's just, I haven't made a career out of it. Um, I have worked in 7 different EMS systems. So from New York City out to Eastern Long Island and upstate New York, and now in 2 different places here in New Jersey, including in Trenton, which is, as far as EMS goes, is a pretty rough place to work in EMS. I was wearing a bulletproof vest every time we would go on a shift. And yeah, it's hard because you see a lot of people in really, really bad situations. In many cases, it may be the worst situation of their entire life, and you might see that multiple times in the same, 12-hour period. So it's very easy, I think, for people to sort of get numb to that, which is not great, and then not process it. I think that I'm fortunate that I've had a lot of psychology training and I've done a lot of coaching over the years, so I kind of like have I don't know everything, but I have strategies for processing that information, and one of them is being able to talk about it. But it's been the most rewarding thing I've ever done, especially like during COVID. Things were just crazy, and we'd see things that we wouldn't have seen otherwise because people didn't want to go to the hospital. So there was just all sorts of scenarios like that. But yeah, I mean, I've seen you name it, car accidents, gunshots, suicides, poisoning, overdoses, all sorts of stuff. And uh, it's always interesting to me because it's always a different challenge. You never see the same thing twice. And you never know necessarily what you're walking into and what you're going to do about it. I mean, well, you have an idea what you're going to do about it, but you never exactly know what you're walking into. Yeah, we do see a really big mental health crisis in EMS, and I've actually done mental health resiliency officer training so that I'm able to work with people who might have had a bad call and can talk through it. And a lot of it is sort of standard psychology stuff, except the EMTs, a lot of times EMTs and paramedics are a lot less likely to seek help. So you have to be a lot more proactive about it.
Right. So is it like a normal, what should I say? Not dispatch, but like what Navy SEALs do after a mission. It's like discussing about what happened, sort of trying to make sense, getting various points of views so that the brain can digest it and make a healthy connections rather than a trauma. What's the process? Let's see that I've seen traumatic shit today. How do I make it healthy and go into uh, use stress rather than stress and trauma, if you like.
Yeah, I think you have to try to see it as like a learning opportunity, a learning experience, rather than something that happened to you. Like it's something that happens for you, right? And I can tell you that I think that I'm particularly good at compartmentalizing, but there have been a couple calls where I got in my car at the end of the shift and I just started crying and I just had to like kind of let it out. And one of those was a case involving a little girl who was like the same age as my daughter at the time, and it's just you kind of like see yourself in that situation sometimes, and but that was really important for me to sort of like you know talk about that, verbalize that, and then you move on. The problem is when people sort of keep it in and think that they're not supposed to feel those emotions and not supposed to express those things, and then that builds up. That it's that simple, but it's also doesn't make it easy.
Right. So talking with your colleagues and so forth, how did these experiences change the way you see life and your general philosophy? Because me, I'm like always working on AI stuff nowadays and biohacking, and I'm very deep into systems. I'm very intellectual about things, but I don't use my hands a lot or see these situations, these life and death situations on a daily basis. And if I would, I think that would change my life view, my world views quite a lot. So, how has these experiences changed your worldview?
um I'd say a lot, because again, I live a really nice life. I have a very good life with really nothing to complain about. So, but that's not the majority of the planet, right? And I think that it's important to have that perspective and to be able to see what it's like for somebody who might not be as fortunate. But at the same time, EMS is really sort of like the most equitable thing you can think of, because anybody can have a heart attack, anybody can have a car accident. It doesn't matter how rich or poor or what background you're from. Any of these things can affect somebody, and you have to help them all the same way, or you have to provide the same level of care no matter what and where you are. So yeah, I just think it just sort of gives me that perspective on the how small some problems really are by comparison.
Are you more protective of your family? What kind of dad are you towards your children?
Quite the opposite, actually. That's like part of the problem is like if one of my kids falls and gets hurt, like it doesn't really raise an eyebrow. Like somebody might be like, "Oh my God," and I'm like, "No, it's they're fine. It's okay." They because a little cut here and there doesn't really like raise the bar. However, like my daughter who's 8 fell off her bike a couple months ago and broke her arm, and right away I was like, it's broken, we need to go to the hospital, let's go. And so it wasn't like, oh no, let's see, let's like, so when it is bad I know, but I'm still not, it's not like, oh my God, we gotta get to the hospital, we gotta do this. It's like I know what we're dealing with. And but the problem with that, which I've explained and we've talked about it in my family, is that it may make me look not very empathetic.
Yeah, I
But
have that too.
you know but I'm gonna get it done.
Yesterday we have 5 dogs, and the big one bit the smaller one yesterday, and the smaller one had some symptoms of like being more slow, and he was probably in pain, right? So I consulted my AIs and made a decision yesterday. No need to call the vet in urgency. And yeah, today he's doing better. We're still gonna get him checked, but yeah, it's about keeping your cool as well. My wife's pretty much the opposite. I guess we make a good duo for that reason. You seem to have, yeah, your ideal life, and yeah, very much into self actualization, lots of involvement in the community, which also is great for mental health. Do you feel that this is the best way for you to contribute? Because I'm into that as well. I'd like to actually do what you do, the voluntary MT. I think I'd learned a lot from that, but my other side is like, why not automate and scale a big operation which I could save millions of lives, right? Like some kind of SaaS, some application. So do you often ponder upon that question, and do you feel that you're making the best use of your god-given talents?
So it's funny you say that. Just today I started working on an idea having to do with a group coaching program for EMS leadership. So chiefs and captains in EMS agencies. There's a big need for it. And part of that is that communication stuff and the psychology stuff, but there's conflict resolution, there's time management, there's a lot of productivity stuff that goes into that. But the EMS professionals in particular tend to really silo and not like engage with peers necessarily. So I just started working on that idea today about doing some sort of group coaching program specifically targeted at EMS leaders.
Very cool. Last question, because I know you're strict on time. World conflicts nowadays. Ari, that's very Israeli. What do you see at that level? Do you feel world leaders are making their best jobs to solve conflicts? And what kind of stress and decision making lessons, stress management and decision making lessons could they learn from what you've taught in the last couple of years?
That's a big one. I mean, I think that there's massive inefficiencies at all levels of government in every shape and form. I've seen it personally. I have done some government consulting, and yeah, there's a lot that can be done there. I mean, at the end of the day, right now we're talking about war, and war is a very unique scenario, right? Like all's fair in love and war. So I don't necessarily know that there's systems and processes that you might want to apply to those situations, or I wouldn't presume to think that I know better than what they are doing in terms of tactical stuff. But yeah, there are often times where it feels like decisions might be made that aren't taking into context sort of the whole picture and future events that might obviously happen because of them.
Where can people find out more about you, Ari?
So everything is at lessdoing.com. I'm on social media at Ari Meisel pretty much everywhere. And if they want to Vox me, they can go to voxwithari.com and get in touch.
Was Ari